Welcome back to Bonkers for Boro. Well, there's less than a month to go until the start of the January transfer window, and for Middlesbrough, it could prove to be a really pivotal 31 days for the club. Michael Carrick's team are hoping to secure promotion from the Championship this season, hopefully through the automatic promotion spots, potentially through the playoffs. But the club are really going to be needing a positive January transfer window in order to make sure that the squad are well prepared for the second half of the season. Now, there's been a lot of reports coming out over the last few days about plans for transfers at the Riverside Stadium. Some of them are exciting, some of them are a little bit worrying for Middlesbrough supporters. There's incomings and there's outgoings, and a couple of loan departures as well being tipped as well. And I'm going to pull them all together for you here to give you a bit of an update on how Middlesbrough are looking going into the January transfer window, and crucially, how Michael Carrick's team could look on the other side of the window as we move into the second half of the season. So we'll start with some of the exciting news. So Middlesbrough have been heavily linked with a move for Louie Barry. Now, for those who don't know, Louie Barry is currently contracted to Aston Villa. He's been on loan with Stockport Town this season. He's had an absolutely outstanding campaign in League One. As you can see there, he's made 19 appearances for Stockport, scored 14 goals, and has provided 1 assist. Now, Louie Barry is someone who's had quite an interesting upbringing, I guess, in the game. Was part of West Brom's academy side. Spent a little bit of time at La Masia in Barcelona as well, which would have been a really incredible experience for him growing up with some really talented players over in Barcelona. He's since come back, joined Aston Villa, and based on how he's performing with Stockport, he looks like a player who has a really high ceiling in terms of potential. Now, Middlesbrough have obviously had a bit of a track record dealing with Aston Villa over the last couple of seasons, most notably last January. Obviously, we had the deal that sold to sell Morgan Rogers to Aston Villa, and that was a big one. And he's gone on to do extremely well, playing in the Champions League and winning a senior cap for England. Middlesbrough brought in Finn Azaz from Aston Villa, and he's done exceedingly well as well. He's slotted into that number 10 role. He had a bit of an up and down first 6 months or so. He's blew a little bit kind of hot and cold, I guess you could say. But over the last few weeks, he's just been absolutely sensational. In my opinion, probably one of the best players in the Championship at the moment. So Aston Villa do really have sort of high ability in terms of being able to develop young players there. And Louie Barry is someone who certainly fits that mould. Now, according to reports, Louie Barry is someone who is likely to be on the move in January. Given how well he's done with Stockport in the first half of the season, it's no surprise that there's going to be a lot of interest in his services. It's been suggested that Aston Villa are willing to recall the player from his loan with Stockport ahead of, taking a view on what's next for him. Now, there hasn't really been any suggestions that this could be a permanent deal. It's possible that it could happen in a similar deal to Finn Azaz last season. You've got to remember he was on loan with Plymouth in the first half of the season before joining Middlesbrough permanently. The same sort of thing could happen, but it could potentially be that Middlesbrough are interested in a loan move for him, depending on what Aston Villa's plans are for the player. Now, Louie Barry is someone who primarily play side of midfield, so he would be someone who would be coming in and providing competition for places with the likes of Riley McGree, Delano Bergzorg, and Mika Hamilton. They're all the players who are typically at the moment challenging for that spot on the left side. Obviously, you don't really want 4 players vying for the same position, so it could then have an impact on one of those players. You'd imagine, this is just pure speculation, but it could potentially be Mika Hamilton, who might drop out of the fold slightly. It could mean that he's made available for a loan move away from Middlesbrough to go on and get some regular first-team football, which I think he needs. But for Middlesbrough, this would be a really exciting deal. There hasn't been a huge amount of speculation in terms of players coming into the Riverside in January. Louie Barry has been one. And I think based on that connection between Middlesbrough and Aston Villa, you do start to think that it could be one that has some legs in it. Middlesbrough won't be the only Championship team who are interested in making a move for him in January. So certainly nothing's done and dusted yet. There's no deal agreed. There's no suggestion that anything is potentially agreed. But for Middlesbrough, it's one that could certainly make sense. He's clearly someone who has an eye for goal, and he's a really talented young lad. He's only 21 years of age, I believe, and so someone who has a really high ceiling in terms of potential. And he really kind of fits that recruitment model that Middlesbrough have got in place under Kieran Scott as well. So this is certainly one to keep an eye on. Like I said, nothing's been agreed just yet, and there's going to be a lot of water to go under the bridge because Aston Villa would need to recall him from Stockport before taking a view on what the future plans would be for him. But as far as Middlesbrough are concerned, this would be a really exciting signing, should it be one that they look to pursue, and should it be one that comes to fruition in the January transfer window. Now, moving on to loan exits, there's been a couple of reports in the local media over the last couple of days about a couple of different Middlesbrough players who could potentially head for the exit doors on loan. Both the Gazette and the Northern Echo have been reporting about the futures of Alex Gilbert and Law McCabe. Both of those players are people who are I guess currently out of the first team fold at the Riverside Stadium. Alex Gilbert, his situation, he was brought in as a development signing last season, and at the start of this season, he looked absolutely incredible. To be honest, he was looking really strong in those first few games of the season, and putting some really positive performances. Most notably, the 3-0 victory over Leeds United in the Carabao Cup. Did really well and looked like a player who was really kicking on and someone who was going to challenge for a first team place. Now, he's been suffering with injury over the last couple of months. He's now on the verge of a return, but I think given the form of Middlesbrough's attacking players, when you look at Finn Azaz and Riley McGree and Ben Doak on the right-hand side, it starts to look a little bit tricky for him in terms of where he's going to fit into those plans and where he's going to get that regular game time. It was suggested that Alex Gilbert could leave the club on loan during the summer transfer window. Obviously, due to his form, he was kept around, but injury sort of struck at the wrong time for Gilbert, which will have been really frustrating for him, and kind of, I guess, stop that momentum in terms of his progression into the first team and really kind of getting some game time under his belt under Michael Carrick. Now, it's been suggested that he could be available for loan. That wouldn't be a surprise, really. If he was to head out, it would possibly be to a championship level club, maybe a League One side, but I think he's probably capable of playing for a championship level team. The ability to go out and get some games under his belt, some first team football, guaranteed first team football would be really, really important for him. I think if he doesn't head out on loan, I do think that he'll get some game time at Middlesbrough because Michael Carrick really likes him. And as I mentioned at the start of the season, he was looking really, really promising. Obviously, he has been injured, and so there'll be a question mark over his sharpness, I guess, going into the Christmas period and beyond. But it's certainly a situation to keep an eye on with Gilbert. He could head out on loan, or he could stay with Middlesbrough and challenge for his first team place. I think either move is potentially possible, but certainly the next 6 months are going to be really, really crucial for Gilbert as he looks to kick on and really just kind of establish himself as a senior level player. He hasn't had a huge amount of first team football in his career to date, and so it's really, really important he gets some games under his belt, whether it's with Middlesbrough or elsewhere. The second player who could potentially leave Middlesbrough on loan is Law McCabe. Now, he's someone who is a slightly different situation to Alex Gilbert. He's someone who's come through Middlesbrough's academy setup, someone who was very highly rated by Michael Carrick and the coaching team, and someone who is likely to make that breakthrough into the first team squad properly, I guess, over the next couple of seasons. But he's found it difficult to break in to the first team fold in the first half of the season. Game time has been hard to come by, and you've got to think that he's been challenging for a place alongside Hayden Hackney and Aidan Morris, who have really held those two spots. But then when you've got Johnny Howson and Dan Barlasser as well, it's been really quite difficult for him to get that game time. So it does feel like a low move in January is quite likely. That's been backed up by the local media who've suggested that it could be a real possibility for Law McCabe to head out, and that could be a move to League One potentially, or League Two. Would likely be the two most likely destinations, I guess, for him, possibly the Scottish Premiership as well. Michael Carrick was asked about Law McCabe in the build-up to the match with Burnley as well, and what the situation could be with him. And Michael Carrick was quoted as saying, especially with the younger players, there's always an element of what's the right loan or what's the best loan. With Law, we'll see. We'll make a call on that. He's doing really well. With the ball, it comes natural to him, his feel and the way he receives the ball for a pass. For his frame and his size, the physicality is a side that's to come as he develops. And that's something we need to try and help him with, picking what's the best move for him to have the next step in his career. Sometimes that will be training and being part of our group. Other times it might be taking a step to go out on loan. They're ongoing discussions, really, and we always try to make the best one that we can. And Michael Carrick's right in what he says there, in that not every player needs to go out on loan to get regular first team football. Sometimes training with the first team and getting a little bits of minutes here and there are what I guess is what's best for players, and they're getting that experience on your doorstep is very, very good from that point of view. But often with, I think, someone like Law McCabe, I think he is someone who would really benefit from a run of games, being able to get maybe 20-25 matches under his belt in the second half of the season, whether it be in League One or League Two or wherever else it might be. I think that would be really, really beneficial for him. He's a player who has a really high ceiling in terms of potential, someone who I could certainly see being a first-team player at Middlesbrough in the future. He's not there yet. When I have seen him, he is a little bit lightweight in midfield. He is someone who needs that little bit more experience and to grow, I guess, to kind of grow as a footballer and physically and that sort of thing. And so I think a loan move would be the best thing for him. And I could certainly see that happening in January. I think it'll be really beneficial for him. And that in turn would mean that when it comes to the summer, when Michael Carrick's preparing for next season, and hopefully that'll be in the Premier League, Law McCabe will be in a position where he'll be able to maybe challenge a little bit more for a first team role. Obviously, you don't know what the future is going to hold for Johnny Howson beyond the summer. There's big transfer interest in a number of Middlesbrough's other midfield players, so you don't know what openings are going to be there for Law McCabe by the summer. So the best thing that he can do is make sure that he's getting regular first team football, continue his growth and his development, and put himself in the best possible position to challenge for a role under Michael Carrick come the summer. Now, January is going to be a really interesting one for Middlesbrough in terms of potential outgoings. You don't put in the performances that Middlesbrough have in the Championship, play such swashbuckling attacking football at time and be challenging near the top of the table without people coming in and being interested in your players. And Emmanuel Latte Lath is someone who I think is going to be pretty much front and centre of that transfer interest as we move into January. Obviously, the summer was a bit of a weird one for him. He was very much committed to Middlesbrough through the vast majority of the summer. Looked like he was dead set to stay at Middlesbrough and continue what he did at the back end of last season. But on deadline day, that all sort of changed. Ipswich came in with a last-minute offer for him, and ultimately that caused a little bit of upheaval. He had his head turned, it seemed. There was a bit of a touch and go as to whether he was going to move to Ipswich, and then obviously there's been a bit of a backlash in the week since about whether he was fully committed to Middlesbrough. Now, I think based on his performances on the pitch, there's no doubting that Emmanuel Latte Lath is committed to Middlesbrough. His performances have been outstanding. He's been a really big part of what Middlesbrough have done so well in these season. The last few weeks in particular, he's been absolutely outstanding. He's still, in my opinion, Middlesbrough's best centre forward. He's an all-round real threat in front of goal. He's fast, he's direct, he's got a great finish, he can head the ball as well. He really is an all-round threat for Middlesbrough, and I think that in turn is a little bit worrying because it means that other clubs are potentially going to come in for him. You don't know whether Ipswich could come back in for him. There's been heavy reports that West Ham are interested in Emmanuel Latte Lath as well. They're not doing particularly well in the Premier League. At the time of recording, Julian Lopetegui's under a bit of pressure as head coach. So there's going to be a real sort of need for change at West Ham over the next month or so. And I think signing a new striker is going to be top of their priorities list. And for Middlesbrough, that is going to be a little bit worrying, given how well Emmanuel Latte Lath has done. He is a player who, in my opinion, is capable of playing in the Premier League. I think he'd be a real capture for any club who comes in for him and makes a move. And for Middlesbrough, that's going to be one that's going to be a little bit worrying, I guess, over the next few weeks. He'll clearly want to challenge himself at the highest level if the opportunity arises. For Middlesbrough, they could be powerless if someone does come in with a suitable offer. I think it would take a sizable bid for Middlesbrough to consider selling him. I think for a striker like Latte Lath, I think it probably would take an offer in excess of 20 million to sell someone like him. But I think if a club in the Premier League does come knocking and if the striker does make it clear that he wants to move on, Middlesbrough could have a big decision to make. And so he is going to be a player who I'd be keeping a very close eye on as we move into the January transfer window, because there's a lot of interest around him, rightly so, because his performances have been outstanding. And I think based on what happened in the summer, there's a little bit of a feeling, I guess, that there could be some unfinished business there, and he could be someone who could potentially move on if the offer is right come the January transfer window. Ben Doak's someone else who's going to get a lot of airtime over the next few weeks. I've been asked a lot of questions on social media about Ben Doak's future at Middlesbrough over the last few weeks, and I think he is someone who's going to attract a few headlines over the next few weeks. I think Liverpool do have the option to recall him from his loan move. They could bring him back to Liverpool and he could challenge for a first-team place there, or they could potentially bring him back and he could head out on loan to another Premier League team to get experience in a higher division. I think from what I understand, I think it seems like that's probably unlikely. I think Liverpool seem quite happy with the loan arrangement, and I think Ben Doak is just doing outstandingly well for Middlesbrough. He's really enjoying his football. His output is absolutely incredible, and I think for Middlesbrough, they'll be very, very happy with how it's gone so far. I think there is a bit of an element of being sort of powerless in this kind of situation. I think Middlesbrough are, I guess, at the will of Liverpool. It depends what they're going to want to do with him. But I mean, based on how well he's done for Middlesbrough, the fact that he seems happy at the club, Liverpool seem happy with how he's doing as well. Going into the Premier League, it will be difficult, but he get the regular game time that he needs. If he was playing in the Premier League, if he's going to be up there, is he going to be playing for a team at the bottom of the bottom end of the Premier League, someone who's not getting on the ball as much? Is he going to have as much opportunity to showcase what he can do, or is he better staying with Middlesbrough, where they're playing such attacking football, which is really, really tailored to his game? I personally think that he'd be better off staying with Middlesbrough for the rest of the season. I'm really interested to know what you think as well. So drop into the comments and let me know what you think on that one. I personally think that he will stay put for the second half of the season, but I do think it's going to make fans a little bit nervous through January. I think there'll be a lot of relief when the transfer window shuts if Ben Doak is still a Middlesbrough player, because he could have a really big say in how Middlesbrough get on this season, and ultimately whether we're able to challenge for promotion and ultimately get ourselves over the line by getting into the Premier League next season. Of course, they're not the only two players who are going to be attracting interest come the January transfer window. There's a whole host of players in Middlesbrough squad who are likely to be on the radar of clubs in the Premier League and around Europe. Two of them are pictured here in Hayden Hackney and Rav van den Berg. There was interest in both of those players over the summer months. Quite rightly, I think they're both Premier League players in the making. I think Rav van den Berg in particular is someone who could go on to play at the very highest level, but he has had his fitness issues in the last couple of months as well, which could potentially put off a couple of suitors. Hayden Hackney, he had a bit of an injury hit season last term, but this term he's been absolutely outstanding. He's probably been one of Middlesbrough's best and most effective performers in such an exciting team to watch. So I think both of these players are ones to watch as we move into the January transfer window. I think as it stands at the moment, there's not really been any serious suggestion of anyone coming in with concrete offers for him. There just seems to be sort of generalised interest from the Premier League, which means that basically there's not a huge amount to worry about from Middlesbrough's point of view. That's not to say that nothing will come to fruition come the January transfer window, and that no one will come in for either of these two players. But as it stands at the moment, it doesn't seem to be anything too concrete. For Middlesbrough, they'll really be hoping that they can keep hold of both of these players through January and beyond, because ultimately with such interest in so many of their players, Middlesbrough don't want to be in a situation where we lose too many of our first team players. It could really have a disruptive influence on Michael Carrick's team. So I think it'd be really important for him to keep as many of this team together as possible. And I think these two players will be a massive part of that, because both players, both Hackney and van den Berg, have a massive role to play for Middlesbrough this season, and will hopefully have a big role in helping us secure a top 6 position or even a top 2 position come the end of the season. So I want to hear from you. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of rumours. There's going to be a lot of speculation going into the January transfer window. But what do you want to see Middlesbrough do? Is there any players that you want Middlesbrough to sign, or is there any positions that need targeting? Drop into the comments below. And I'm also interested to know about the players who I've mentioned could be potentially heading for the exit door. Let me know what you think about those transfer situations. Let me know what you think about Latte Lath and Hayden Hackney. Ben Doak, would you like to see him stay at the Riverside? Drop into the comments below. Let me know what you think about Middlesbrough's plans going into January. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do hit like and hit subscribe as well. There's going to be plenty more coming over the next few weeks going into January. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to be very tense, but ultimately that's what we're in this business for. It's a really exciting time of year. So drop into the comments. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch up with you next time.